enter the otherworldly and dissipate into the unknown. You're tuning into 1013, the radio station from hell and back.
Welcome to Channel 1013, dear listeners. I am your storyteller, your music director, your sound against a silent night, and the only light shining in a dark world. This is the darker side, and above all else, I am your host, Herald Gravely. Another night, and we're gathered together on 1013 on the darker side. Once again, I am your host, Herald Gravely, and I have a very exciting show for you tonight. We'll be looking into the upcoming horror thriller film disguised as a sports hero film, Him. There's a number of upcoming horror games that I'd like to discuss, each without an actual release date, with music by Pennies on the Track and their song, Rock on the River. We also have another tale of terror based on a trip I took the malevolent Hotel Colorado in Glenwood Springs. Till then, I hope you enjoy every note and each word, as I can already hear the monstrosities forming outside of our broadcast station. In Him, Jordan Peele plunges audiences into a feverish nightmare of ambition, obsession, and ritual sacrifice. When rising football star Cam Cade survives a brutal attack from a deranged fan, his career and his sense of self lie in ruins. Salvation arrives in the form of Isaiah White, a legendary 8-time championship quarterback whose name drips with myth and glory. Isaiah offers Cam a second chance at greatness, inviting him to train in his private, isolated compound, far from reporters, far from family, far from escape. But this sanctuary hides something darker than Cam could ever imagine. The drills are merciless, the discipline bordering on torture, and the team operates under a set of rules that feel less like strategy and more like scripture. Whispers echo through the halls about strange rites and blood-bound oaths. Shadows in the locker room seem to move when no one's there. And Isaiah's unwavering gaze carries the weight of something ancient, something hungry. As the season's end approaches, Cam realizes this isn't about winning, it's about surrender. And in this game, the only way to become a champion is to give him everything. As for myself, I've always been a curious caretaker of Jordan Peele's films. Get Out was a perfectly fine racially ignited thriller with elements of body and mind horror, where the protagonist was neither controlled nor in control. As far as Us, Peele's direction seemed to take a much more abstract turn, focusing more on the dynamics of individuality as opposed to doppelgangers and conformity, presenting us with a film that delves deeper into the human psyche, as well as our requirements as individuals. Finally, the film Nope was a spectacle of art direction, with shots being filmed more like symbolic art pieces rather than scenes. However, the story and the nemesis of the film take an unexpected and somewhat awkward turn of events. Even if it wasn't what the audience expected, that doesn't mean that their expectations were met. And although I personally enjoyed the film for the most part, I think that Peele was trying a bit too hard to work like Shyamalan, who had also fallen off in very recent years. And with all of that backstory, where does that leave my review of Him by Jordan Peele? Well, it's hard to discuss this film without bringing up spoilers, but I'll be as straightforward as possible without giving too much away. Him as a film reminds me a lot of Peele's previous film, Nope. You watch the trailers and think you know what you're in for, just for the entire plot to be flipped on its head without evading your expectations. And that's a contradiction in of itself, though most, if not all, of Jordan Peele's films are contradictory, or at the least, elusive to a point. What I mean is that, yes, this is a sports film, but it's also a mockery of sports films, as well as sports, fame, and the idea of greatness. It isn't without its twists and turns, even when some feel out of the far left field. And yes, that was a sports analogy. The cast is extraordinary as always, and the plot is something like a maze with different exits, meaning there will be different interpretations to both the story as a whole and possibly the ending entirely. It's a thrilling adventure through high-stakes gambles, gore-induced visuals, painfully captured elements of pure torture, and as always, a mind-altering psychology involving the protagonist and story. Aside from The Monkey, the Stephen King adaptation that was released earlier this year, I think this is probably one of my favorite horror films to reach theaters in our year 2025. But I feel as though many moviegoers will have differing opinions and overall experiences with this film. It's not as straightforward as a Marvel movie, though it isn't as complex as something produced by the late Stanley Kubrick. It's somewhere in the middle, and hopefully that spectrum appeals to a greater audience, because I do believe that this is a movie that needs to be seen, especially after the rights to weapons seem to be swept away from Jordan Peele. Here on the darker side, we love our horror games, and boy, do we have a lot to discuss tonight. In Clive Barker's Hellraiser revival, a desperate soul unlocks the cursed puzzle box and is drawn into a labyrinth where agony and ecstasy entwine into something inhuman. From the darkness, the Cenobites emerge, cold, methodical angels of suffering, dragging their prey into a realm where flesh is art, pain is devotion, and every scream is a hymn. As reality unravels, the victim discovers that escape isn't about running. It's about surrendering to the exquisite horror that waits beyond the veil. With a to-be-release date, Hellraiser Revival will be the first Clive Barker video game since Jericho in 2007. And I have no doubts that Barker can deliver on gruesome, gory, elaborate terrors, but his stories can be somewhat questionable. Although tapping into his most acclaimed horror series, Hellraiser may just be what this game needs in order to strive, especially after the recent rise of games like Friday the 13th, Alien Isolation, and whatever IPs are coming to Dead by Daylight. Hell, pretty soon we'll have the freaking Teletubbies on Dead by Daylight. And the true horror is that DBD may never end its franchise leeching. Another title by the name of ILL hurls players into a grotesque survival horror nightmare where reality rots, flesh mutates, and every shadow hides something eager to tear you apart. Trapped in a decaying world twisted by madness and unspeakable experiments, you must unravel terrifying secrets while battling relentless, nightmarish creatures that blur the line between the living and the dead. Every step deeper pulls you further into a brutal fight for sanity and survival. It's being both marketed and praised for its apparent dismemberment physics. Even with the limited gameplay being released to the public, it's hard to judge though whether this zombie, not zombie, survival first-person shooter wants to be more like Left 4 Dead or Call of Duty Zombies mode. The graphics are impressive, at the least, But the story, if any, seems to be shallow at best. Aside from dismembering anything in your way, I'd be more interested in the feeling of the blastback and recoil of the weapons, the enemy variety, and what surprises may lay in store. Otherwise, and right now, this seems like a Doom clone with better graphics. Then there's Alien Isolation 2, which plunges you back into the suffocating darkness of deep space, where a relentless xenomorph stalks every shadow with terrifying intelligence. As you navigate abandoned stations and derelict ships, every sound could be your last, and every decision might mean survival or becoming the next victim in an unforgiving hunt. Tense, atmospheric, and pulse-pounding, this sequel takes fear to new heights, forcing you to outwit the perfect predator in a desperate battle for your life. With the amazing success of the first installment also reaching high praise within the virtual reality consoles, Alien Isolation 2 seems to be upping the ante for more immersive, suppressive, and dreadful scares. And the aliens themselves aren't the only enemies you should be looking out for. Again, it seems as though hiding isn't an option. And as a player, you can't be performing the same tactics again and again, as the alien and others will learn from your playstyle. You'll have to develop new strategies as you play if you want to survive. And that alone may be scary enough. The need for adaptation and single-second decision-making will surely play an integral role in your overall survival. But let's be honest, most of us are gonna die. Just like in Project M by Shadow Fredboy, which thrusts players into a hauntingly immersive psychological thriller where reality fractures and nightmares bleed into the waking world. As you unravel a cryptic mystery trapped within a nightmarish, shifting landscape, every choice twists your perception, and every shadow hides a secret that could shatter your mind. Combining eerie atmosphere, mind-bending puzzles, and chilling storytelling, Project M promises a suspenseful journey into the darkest corners of the human psyche. It's a small indie project available on Steam, and I'd urge each of you to go check it out. With an interesting story, a terrifying setting, and some great flashlight mechanics, I believe that it's worth giving a try, especially because it's free to play, so there's nothing to lose. Well, you might lose your sanity, but sanity is quite frankly overrated. It's that time again on the broadcast, and we got a good one for you all. This is Pennies on the Track and their song, The Rock and the River, right here on 1013, The Darker Side. Enjoy, y'all.
The rock and the river move together, digging this beautiful groove forever. The rock gets smooth and the river gets wide. The rock gets hot when the river runs dry. The river rages, the rock rolls on. Time stays still in the setting sun. River cuts deep in canyon walls. And where the rock breaks, the river falls. Rock steady when the river runs wide. Rock steady when the river runs dry. River runs dry, yeah. River makes time with whoever drinks her. The rock never wonders where she goes. Rock gonna rise when the river bends. And the Delta Blue rock gonna turn to sand, turn to sand. And the ebb and flow, the ebb and flow. Steady on in the ebb and flow, the ebb and flow. River gonna wash your sins away. Down on the rock, there's a price to pay. River gonna ebb and the river gonna flow. So rock steady on in the ebb and flow, in the ebb and flow, in the ebb and flow, the ebb and flow. Steady on in the ebb and flow, in the ebb and flow, in the ebb and flow, the ebb and flow. Rock steady on in the ebb and flow, in the ebb and flow, in the ebb and flow, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Built in 1893, the Grand Hotel Colorado carries a long and shadowed history filled with tales of heartbreak, tragedy, and unexplained phenomena. Over the decades, numerous guests have reported encounters with spirits that refuse to rest. One of the most famous hauntings is the apparition of a woman in Victorian-era clothing seen wandering the halls, often near the ballroom, believed to be a former resident who met a tragic end. Rooms such as Room 101 and Room 202 have long been hotspots for paranormal activity. Guests awaken to cold touches, soft footsteps pacing the room, or even full-bodied apparitions standing silently by their beds. Some have felt invisible hands grip their wrists, while others hear mournful crying echoing late at night. Electrical disturbances are common, with TVs flickering on and off and lights dimming without explanation. Staff report hearing voices when no one is around, objects moving on their own, and eerie sensations of being watched. The hotel's basement, once used for storage and other mysterious purposes, is rumored to be a focal point of restless spirits tied to the building's dark past. Despite these unnerving experiences, the Hotel Colorado remains a cherished historic landmark, its paranormal presence woven into its identity, drawing thrill seekers and ghost hunters hoping to glimpse the spectral residents that linger in its shadows. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper in the air tells a story of lives once lived and perhaps never fully departed. When Third Palm Paranormal was on the scene back in 2021, during the tail end of pandemic, they were impacted by more than simple ghost stories. At the time, the manager of the hotel had admitted that the place was unsettling at times, and after an interview with the bartender, their suspicions were confirmed. This is the unfinished story of Third Palm Paranormal's investigation at the Hotel Colorado on February 14th, 2021. A most haunting Valentine's vacation. It started off simple enough, moving through the hallways, scouting each of the 4 floors, marking any paranormal sites that were bound by a high activity. Nothing unusual for Third Palm Paranormal. It wasn't until dusk, when one of the members was resting for the long night, while the other stayed up with a recorder and began asking questions. In their hotel room, with no neighbors and hardly any other guests, a voice was captured. "Who's there?" It was the voice of a young woman. Though there were no noticeable children present in the hotel that day or night, it could have been the voice of the nurse who was killed by a jealous lover who had stayed at the hotel back in the 1940s during World War II. Or Or perhaps it was asked by the woman who had lunged herself from the hotel, begging the question during her descent. During the evening, Third Palm Paranormal was able to interview the barkeeper on the main floor. He allegedly affirmed all possibilities of paranormal activity at the hotel, even claiming to have seen disturbing specters roam the hallways in the middle of the night. While gathering evidence from the basement, a well-known site for spiritual activity at the hotel, the team was met by unpredicted circumstances. During World War II, the basement was used as a morgue, so it undoubtedly housed a number of spiritual entities from within. At the time, Third Palm Paranormal was using an old 1940s transistor radio to communicate with the deceased. After a few unanswered questions, the radio suddenly went silent from the white noise and static that had passed through it earlier. And then, a voice called out. It was intangible, but it answered back with a loud, distorted growl, and every question afterwards was followed by silence before returning to a burst of sound and then led by soft static. The only other known footage that was captured that night was within the hotel's lobby. While roaming the area and asking questions on opposite sides of the area, a stationary camera had been placed on the grand staircase overlooking most of the lobby itself. And after around 20 minutes, a shadow could be seen walking through the area, with neither investigators noticing until they had processed the footage days later. With cameras suddenly losing power on fully charged batteries in the basement and microphones cutting out completely on the 4th floor, there is indeed something strange happening at the Hotel Colorado. Although the full investigation was never completely uploaded and I only have their story to tell, I can assure you that everything said during tonight's broadcast is in fact a true story. And who knows, with enough support, Third Palm Paranormal may just return for another investigation at the haunted Hotel Colorado in Glenwood Springs. But until then, I, Herald Gravely, must bid you all a good night. The scratches against the door are growing increasingly unsettling, and I fear that one of them has made its way into the studio during our broadcast. So until next time, and I sure hope that there will be a next time, you've been tuned into 1013 The Darker Side. Be sure to keep your doors locked and the lights on. Otherwise, you may just end up like me. So long.